Right, with FHFA killing what's called the adverse market fee. When refi started kicking up, gosh, we're not lenders, but it's relative to all of our clients, so we're bringing this information to you. A couple years ago, I believe they kicked in this additional fee, which was, God, I was about to say shitty, but I said it. So, it's not a G-rated
I
show.
think they call it 50 basis points. But yeah.
Yeah, that's how much it is. They just all of a sudden said, oh, look, we have low interest rates. Everybody's going to want to refinance. Let's charge people more. Literally. I don't know what the justification was. And everybody now, for a long time, has been paying the additional, 50 basis points. If you don't understand the lingo, it's basically a 0.5%. So as good as the rates have been, we've been paying an additional 0.5%, and you don't see it in that layout. Most lenders, not all of them, but most lenders don't charge points, and basically what they do then is they build that into their rate. So if they were going to charge you 3%, and FHFA is charging them an additional 0.5% or 50 basis points, then they're not telling you that. They're just saying we're charging you 3.5%. That's the rate, just built in. So when this takes effect, as you're going to read through the article, rates should dip a little more. They should definitely go lower.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead. FHFA kills adverse market fee. Mortgage industry cheers elimination of 50 basis point fee on most refinanced mortgages. The Federal Housing Finance Agency, FHFA, is officially axing Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae's controversial adverse market refinance fee. Starting in August, lenders will no longer be required to pay the government-sponsored enterprises a fee of 50 basis points when they deliver refinanced mortgages. FHFA Acting Director Sandra Thompson said the elimination of the fee will help families take advantage of the current low-rate environment. Today's actions furthers FHFA's priority of supporting affordable housing while simultaneously protecting the safety and soundness of the enterprises, said Thompson. The elimination of the fee is one of a number of changes the mortgage industry has asked the federal regulatory agency to make. Pete Mills, Senior Vice President of Residential Policy at the Mortgage Bankers Association, said the move was very positive for borrowers and appreciated by the mortgage industry. Forbearance exiting process has gone well. The rate of exits is accelerating and the job market is strong. All of those things belie the notion that we're still in an adverse market. FHFA began charging the adverse market fee on most refinanced mortgages last year due to increased costs and risk to the agency as a result of COVID-19. Critics of the policy, however, said that it was simply a way for the GSEs to increase their capital levels during last year's historic refinance boom. The GSEs have also performed well throughout the pandemic. In the first quarter of 2021, Fannie Mae reported $5 billion in net income, and Freddie Mac reported $2.8 billion in earnings. The elimination of the adverse market fee is one of the first decisive policy actions the agency has taken since a long-awaited Supreme Court decision allowed President Joe Biden to fire the FHFA's director at will. Within hours of the decision, Biden removed FHFA director and Trump appointee Mark Calabria, a libertarian economist, and installed Thompson to lead the agency. In her first weeks directing the federal regulatory agency, Thompson has said expanding access to credit in communities of color is a top priority. In June, FHFA also announced that its servicers must adhere to the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's additional procedural requirements governing the foreclosure process a full month before it takes effect. So, Darren, we were all about good news in our email subject, and it sounds like there are a couple things going on here.
This definitely sounds like good news, and expanding availability of housing to a broader base and lower income people is the other topic we have today as well. So refinancing just helps keep people in their house and obviously lowers payments and improves quality of life if somebody can do that. So very excited about this happening.
Guys, if you noticed, I went ahead and put it in the comments if you want to read the article later. But again, good news and some foreshadowing of some more good news with this change in the leadership.
Yeah, and again, just reiterating, I know you said it in there, but this is specifically for refinancing only. This isn't if you're going out and getting a first mortgage. Those didn't have that additional fee that was added.
Okay, and we'll go on to the next one here. Home builders. Home builders urge Congress to address inventory crisis. NAHB CEO Jerry Howard testified before Congress this week. Any comments beforehand, Darren?
No, I think there's a moment to converse about each of the three main segments. So yeah, go for it.
All right. Hampered by labor shortages, rising material costs, and government regulations, home builders are looking to Congress for ways to decrease the estimated underbuilding gap of 5.5 million homes and help with housing affordability. The National Association of Home Builders, NAHB, is joining the National Association of Realtors, NAR, in its bid to rectify the tremendous housing shortage in the U.S. NAHB CEO Jerry Howard testified before Congress and called on lawmakers to enact key policy proposals that will help home builders to expand the housing supply, reduce the housing deficit, and improve housing affordability for all Americans. Over the past decades, the residential construction industry has underbuilt and not kept pace with demand due to several supply-side constraints, said Howard. These include a lack of skilled labor and building lots, tight lending conditions, shortages, and rapidly rising prices for building materials, and excessive regulatory burdens on home builders that have added approximately 25% to the cost of a single-family home and 33% to a multifamily unit. Progress must be made on all fronts to ease the supply side challenges that are holding back housing production. What can Congress and the Biden administration do to decrease the underbuilding gap? Howard requested the following steps to expand access to affordable housing. All right, so number one, fix the building materials supply chain. The U.S. must immediately engage with Canada to adopt a new softwood lumber agreement and stop the imposition of harmful tariffs on Canadian lumber that increase prices and price volatility. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo has committed to holding a summit of industry stakeholders to examine supply chain issues for lumber and other materials and to explore policy solutions. We look forward to participating in that process, said Howard. Lower construction costs would help lower the underbuilding gap.
Sure. Gosh, we haven't heard that word in, 2-3 years, tariffs. I can honestly say I don't know if those tariffs were put in by the Trump administration, but tariffs don't work. Everybody knows tariffs don't work. Our government's collecting more money because of that, but the cost of those tariffs all of them are pushed down to the consumer. So yeah, eliminating those tariffs is a good thing. I completely support that.
You know, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a Trump thing. Right, there was steel that he had tariffs on. That was affecting construction as well.
Yep. Well, I mean, it's anti-competition. It's a desire to have more local products sold. And, in some cases, as they sided with the steel, there's an uncompetitive advantage if government of other countries are involved to help facilitate and sell these things at a cheaper price, or even help that product be made and delivered without needing a profit from the country, then, U.S. suppliers won't be able to compete. We need to have our own supply and resources, so our industry can't be eliminated. But other than that, our economy says it's about competition, and adding tariffs is not supporting competition.
Okay. Number two, improve the low-income housing tax credit. Congress needs to enact H.R. 2573, the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act, homebuilders said. The bill would finance more than 2 million additional multifamily units over the next decade by increasing the amount of credits allocated to each state and expanding the number of affordable housing projects that can be built using private activity bonds. It would be just one fix for the underbuilding gap.
Right. I do think our government, our system works best when there's a private public interaction. These days, it's hard to find someone who's conversing from the middle, from a perspective that truly benefits both sides. But when it comes to housing and the shortage that we've had and the lack of building, because there was so much pushback from government and it made it hard to build, and people don't want more density. We just need more houses, and public-private interaction is going to help make that happen. And we do need it on the entry level. So affordable housing credit on entry level is a way to go. So often it's about taxes that government can inject to help incentivize things to move in a certain direction, and allowing people to get into their first homes is life-changing.
Well, that's the thing. You talk about, I mean, you go down the street, you see all sorts of construction, and, private, corporate entities can only do so much, and, right, they won't take certain risks, and government needs to be there to sort of have that handhold for them.
Of course. I mean, if you're in private business, in housing, it happens as much as anywhere else. People get upset with builders and developers for making money. I mean, give me a break. In all sincerity, give me a break. You're not out there saying, where can I throw my money away? Let me, take on all the risk and not benefit at all. The only way that becomes more equitable is to have a public-private venture there. Or, if there's a public side where they start introducing housing. In the past, that's never worked. I don't know if there's a formula that can make it work going forward. But if it's private entities building things, it's going to be for profit. And unless the government steps in to find ways to make it more affordable to make these, and they can, both on the local all the way up to the federal level, there are things they can do to make it more affordable to build things. And they can incentivize builders by then insisting that they pass those efficient methods or cost savings elements through to the purchasers in some way. This is where coming from the middle, really find things that help both sides. It's always something I seek personally.
Okay, number 3, reformulate current home ownership tax incentives. Recent tax changes have undermined the effectiveness of the mortgage interest deduction, resulting in fewer middle-class taxpayers itemizing and incentives flowing more to high-income households.
100%, I will say the tax structure favors people owning houses. It depends on where you live as far as how much it helps you. Under the Trump tax plan that went into effect a couple of years ago, they introduced, limitations on what they called SALT. That was their acronym for it. A total that is deductible on your federal income against interest, property taxes, things related to your house. And they capped that at $10,000. So for those who live in a high-priced area, they're not getting those incentives. For those in a lower-priced area, they moved up, as they're mentioning here, the itemized deductions to a level where if you've bought a $200,000-$300,000 house, you might not need to itemize anymore. So there's really no tax incentive, which is what they're saying here, than to purchase. Right? Are you getting enough out of the purchase if that's the case? I will say, like no time in my lifetime, the Biden administration is evaluating taxes and talking about things like they never have before. Taxes favor people that own property in an incredibly unequal way. They help build wealth, particularly for investors, tremendously. And that's not a bad thing. They're just utilizing the systems that have been created, but the systems can be changed. And then if that's done, it can bring more balance to the entry level and middle class.
It's funny we're talking about this because I was reading something on The Real Deal, and it was talking about a new fund. I believe it was Tricon, and it was a $5 billion fund to purchase 18,000 homes across America. Purely for the rental side of it, and that it's a great asset that they used to not really pay attention to. So how does that leave the smaller guy?
There was something that, like a couple of years ago, I think maybe it was pre-Trump, but it was they introduced opportunity zones. I think that was before, but on there's a good element to it, and then there's a huge incentive for wealthy people. Basically, they've identified areas and who's identifying them. That's always the question, but they've identified areas that need an infusion of money to build housing, to build shopping centers, to develop these communities that are considered lower income. And if you choose to do that, if you exchange, it used to be you would exchange into that. So if somebody sold 50 units somewhere and they wanted to go build 100 homes in a lower income neighborhood, there's a real tax incentive for them to do that. Those are the type of public-private elements that can incentivize, move things in a direction that incentivizes homes in areas where they could be needed. The one thing I will say, the thing that we hear often is that you reach a threshold, like I can't imagine, it doesn't mean it can't happen, but I can't imagine having $300,000-$400,000 houses in LA proper anytime soon, maybe never again. I just really don't see it happening. So there is a point where an area maybe has just moved up too much. So it's not like any of these programs are going to make it so that, somebody working a minimum wage job is going to be able to buy a house. There's always some sacrifices. Maybe you move onto the outskirts a little bit, because there are $200,000-$300,000 houses within an hour of LA. That's where public transportation comes in and things can work. This is what happens in big metropolitan cities. As long as you have public transportation, you can function and people can afford to continue to buy still. So there are some sacrifices made. The tax code is more often than not, and the building codes can also incentivize developers, as they've done on the state level for ADUs. That's incentivized a tremendous amount of development and brought a lot of infill units into the city.
New industry.
Yep.
Okay, so in conclusion, a shift away from the mortgage interest deduction to a permanent home ownership tax credit that is targeted to lower and middle income Americans would make home ownership more accessible to hardworking American families. Additionally, a permanent first-time homebuyer tax credit would complement this shift and could provide some relief to the challenge of accumulating a down payment.
Right, that would be huge. Huge. People can't even get into buying a home because they can't. They're even if they have a good income, often that income goes towards a high rent. It's a hard situation, and any help is fantastic.
Well, certainly, with Biden jumping in, he seems to want to move quickly on some of these things. Again, good news for buyers.
Yeah, good news for the industry. For obviously, when people buy homes, their perception of their neighborhood and their personal investment and care, what goes into where they live, all changes. It changes those dynamics. So the more people that are able to have a home ownership, and we've been moving in the wrong direction in that category for a while, the more people that can own a home, it's better for communities.
Okay, next. Guys, again, I put the link there for you if you'd like to read this article.